Some Pharisees approached Jesus and asked, "Is it against the law for a man to divorce his wife?" They were testing him. He answered them, "What did Moses command you?" "Moses allowed us," they said, "to draw up a writ of dismissal and so to divorce." Then Jesus said to them, "It was because you were so unteachable that he wrote this commandment for you. But from the beginning of creation, God made them male and female. This is why a man must leave father and mother, and the two become one body. They're no longer two, therefore, but one body. So then what God has united, man must not divide." Back in the house, the disciples questioned him again about this. And he said to them, "The man who divorces his wife and marries another is guilty of adultery against her. And if a woman divorces her husband and marries another, she is guilty of adultery too." Do you remember the story the Sadducees told Jesus about the 7 brothers that married the same woman? It goes something like this. There were 7 brothers, and the first married a woman, but he died childless. So, according to the law of Moses, the brother did what was demanded of him. He married his first brother's widow. But he too died, leaving her childless. As with the third, and then the fourth. In fact, in the end, all 7 had married the woman, and all had died childless. It's one of the Pharisees' arguments about there can't be a resurrection. But Jesus dismisses it. One thing that story didn't bring out was that the brothers were to marry the widow irrespective of whether they were already married or not. You see, polygamy was not only allowed, but on occasion demanded. Many of the characters in the Old Testament had more than one wife. Abraham, David, Jacob, Solomon. Solomon had 700 wives and 300 concubines. A lower class sort of wife. Polygamy was the norm in society until the Romans. The Romans found it appalling and outlawed the practice throughout the empire. But in Palestine, they turned a blind eye to it. I think that's important because that's part of the context in which the laws of Moses around marriage and divorce developed. When the Pharisees go to Jesus and ask, "Can a man divorce his wife?" I think secretly they were hoping Jesus would just say, "No, they can't." Because then he would be contradicting the law of Moses, which said they could, and they could use that against him. Jesus doesn't respect the laws of Moses. How can he be of God? And that would have been an end to him. But it's a much more complicated question than that. And they knew it themselves. Because when Jesus turned the question round on them, what does Moses say? They already had their answer ready for him. Yes, Moses says men can divorce wives. They can draw up a writ of dismissal and hand it to them and dispatch, put aside their wife. The question really that raged among the Pharisees was, for what reason might a man be able to set aside his wife? How significant would the reason have to be? Some thought it could be entirely trivial. He'd had enough of her. She displeased him in some way. Others thought it had to be extremely serious, something like adultery. And the Pharisees couldn't agree. And maybe they were hoping too that they could draw Jesus into that debate and get him to side with one party or another. But Jesus doesn't do that. Jesus points out that they're looking at marriage and divorce for from entirely the wrong point of view. They assume that a man has a right to divorce his wife because the law says he does. But Jesus says that wasn't God's intention. And their law contradicts the intention of God. But his answer isn't just about divorce and the nature of marriage. It's a criticism of their whole understanding, the Pharisees' whole understanding of the nature of marriage. And Jesus is very much siding with the Romans, that polygamy, which again is against the spirit of God's gift of marriage. He quotes some of the arguments that are used in their society against it. He quotes Genesis, the two become one. And he raises the level of the conversation from the legalistic to the spirit. The spirit of marriage is for the good of the people concerned. The two become one. In a way, they complete each other, that they support and encourage each other, they love each other, and in that love, they are enabled to find life more fully. That's God's intention. That's what the book of Genesis lays out as God's intention and what Jesus reminds them. It's not about rights and obligations. It's about journeying together into life, to find life. The law was there to protect rights, and sometimes they needed to be protected, but often they turned them round. There was a law that says a man must not divorce one wife simply because he wants to take a second. Why would he do that in a polygamous society? Because he had to continue to care. He'd made a commitment, a covenant with his first wife. He had to continue to look after her and care for her and provide for her. And part of that provision was to give her attention, equal attention to the second or the third or the 700th in the case of Solomon. But husbands weren't always eager to do that. If they couldn't divorce a wife because she had become an inconvenience, they had to find reason. What would be a good reason, an acceptable reason, according to the law, to set a wife aside? That was the argument of the Pharisees. But women had rights too. A woman wasn't to be trapped. If a husband failed to live up to that covenant, to that commitment, if a marriage became abusive or even neglectful, then the man was obliged to let her go free. And in that freedom, she was able to marry another. But the law had become all about the rights of the man and how easy it was to get out of a marriage that was no longer convenient. And Jesus condemned that, condemned the attitude. He reminded them and his disciples and us of God's original intention, that people come together in a committed, loving relationship to find life together. That's the ideal. That's the intention of God in creation, in the book of Genesis. That's what we are to work towards, if we're able. Does Jesus prohibit divorce altogether? I don't think he does. I think he just reminds us all of why the gift of marriage was given, so that two people may find life together. If that relationship no longer provides a means to finding life, if that relationship robs people of life rather than enhances it, are they to remain trapped? Is God's intention that people have life taken from them rather than given? I doubt it. The ideal is set before us as an ideal, something to work towards if we're able.